Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Cjae and today we will be discussing the case of Clara Harris and David Lynn Harris. Clara and David were a presumably happy, healthy, and wealthy couple. However, mistakes of infidelity led to dire consequences with an unfortunate witness. Trigger warning, there will be discussions of murder and infidelity in today's case. If these are uncomfortable topics for you to listen to, it won't hurt my feelings if you clicked away. A little bit of background on Clara Harris. She was born in Bogota, Colombia, where she was raised by her widowed mother. I don't really have much information on her background, to be honest, but I do know that from a very young age, she was really determined to make something of herself, to become wealthy in the future and find success in whatever it is that she did. She began studying dentistry in Colombia, but she moved to the US in the late 80s where she continued her studies. And eventually, after she graduated, she began her work in dentistry. She was described as a beauty queen. She had thick red hair. She had a perfect, beautiful smile. And she was also described as having a cute mole on the left side of her cheek. After completing her residency at the University of Texas Houston Dental Branch, she won a local beauty contest and coined the nickname Miss Columbia Houston. And that's pretty much all I have for Clara. And it's the same way for David as well. I don't have a lot of background information on him. David Lynn Harris was described as very intelligent. He graduated second in his class. He also went to the same university that Clara transferred into when she came into the US for dentistry. He was described as a charming, folksy, kind, gentle man. And his favorite word was golly, whatever that means. He was an American orthodontist who owned a chain of dental offices along with his wife, Clara. She had a dental office in Lake Jackson, and David had a dental office in Clear Lake City. And that's pretty much all I have on David, but let's get into talking about David and Clara when they first met. David and Clara first met in 1991. They were both in their late 30s and they were working at the Castle Brandt Center in Houston. Clara even reported later that after her and David first met, David called his dad to tell his dad that he met this wonderful woman and he was completely smitten and he was very, very interested in pursuing a relationship with her. After dating for less than a year, Clara and David got married on Valentine's Day of 1992 at the Nassau Bay Hilton Hotel. David also had a child from a previous marriage and her name was Lindsay. People would consider David and Clara as a very successful couple. They had a large home in Friendswood, which was worth $500,000. And regardless of how busy Clara was in her day of work, she would always come home and make dinner. In 1992, David opened his first dental practice in Clear Lake City called the Space Center Orthodontic. And in 2001, it was reported that he was making at least $35,000 per month from this office alone. And also bear in mind that he had 7 dental practices open at this point in time. So he was making $35,000 from one of his 7 dental offices. So when I tell you that these people were wealthy, they were wealthy. They were well off. In 1993, Clara opened her first dental office in Lake Jackson. Clara and David were described as very much in love. Clara had pictures of her and David all over her office, and she would change them out every few months. They also spoke on the phone multiple times a day, and even their friends and coworkers would report that they would never get off of the phone without first saying, "I love you." Clara's friends even reported that Clara was very much in love with David. She was obsessed with him. She would talk about him all the time. Her life completely revolved around David. And one of her coworkers even said, and I quote, "I wish I could love my husband in the same way that Clara loved David," which is crazy. In 1998, Clara gave birth to twins and she named them Brian and Bradley. Lindsay would spend the school year in Ohio with her mother, and then she would come down for summer break to spend time with Clara and David as well as her brothers. Lindsay was also described as a very talented violinist. Both David and Clara were devoted members of the Shady Crest Baptist Church. David played the drums in a contemporary Christian soft rock band called the Colemans. And from David's previous marriage, there were no reports of infidelity or any wrongdoings or anything to be suspicious of. David's ex-wife would even report that the marriage ended because David was too devoted in his career and he wasn't really making that much time for them as a couple and a family with Lindsay. So now we're jumping forward to about 10 years after David and Clara have been married. This is when David unfortunately decided to start having an affair with his secretary, Gail Bridges. Gail was described as beautiful. She was petite. She had flawless skin, brown eyes. She had a pixie cut, and she was a 39-year-old mother of 3. Gail was also previously married about 2 years before this affair took place, and she was married to a very well-off State Farm agent named Stephen Bridges. Gail and Stephen were also described as the perfect couple. They also had a lot of money and they were living in a gated subdivision in League City. After the divorce was finalized, she moved into a smaller home, and about a year later, she was hired to work as a secretary at the Space Center Orthodontics, which is David's office. She also said that working at the Space Center Orthodontics was a step down from the money that she was making previously, so she had to get adjusted a little bit to making a little bit less money. She was making about $1,800 a month, and even though it was a step down from the money that she was used to, she did say that she liked working at that dental office and the very specific assets, David, that came with working in that office. In about late February in 2002, this is when David started showing interest in Gail. He would linger around her desk. He would chit chat. He would ask her to lunch, take her out to a restaurant called Perry's. And by April or May of 2002, they were intimate. And here's the messed up part about all of that. A few months after David started showing interest, they were intimate, but they were intimate at the Nassau Bay Hilton Hotel, the same hotel that David and Clara got married in. Like, how messed up is it for not only is this man cheating, but he's bringing his mistress to the same hotel that he married his wife in? Isn't that crazy? David would pay for the room in cash so that it couldn't be traced back to him. It wouldn't be on the credit card bill, or it wouldn't be on any of the debit card charges. He would book the room under a different name, so it wouldn't be under his name and it wouldn't be under Gail's name. And he would get them a really nice room. It would be overlooking the water, beautiful views. I mean, this man was going all out, taking his mistress to the same hotel. I'm sorry, I just can't get over that. And even though David was not accused of having any affairs or doing any wrongdoings in his previous marriage, Gail, on the other hand, we can't say the same about her because she was accused of having an affair from her previous marriage with Stephen. So during her divorce with Steve accused her of having with her best friend, Julie Knight. Okay, so this is the part of the case where you have to bear with me for a little bit because I'm going to be throwing in a bunch of new names. And I feel like it's really important, though, to get this background information on Gail a little bit before we dive into the case of David and Clara. So to get a little bit of background on the situation with Gail, she was accused of having a lesbian affair with her best friend, Julie Knight, and she was accused by Steve during their divorce. At the time of the affair that she was accused of having, Julie was also married to Charles Knight. Charles Knight was a software specialist for an aerospace company. He also accused his wife of having an affair with Gail. So both Stephen and Charles accused their wives of having an affair with each other. All of these accusations of cheating came up during the divorce between Gail and Steve and Julie and Charles. And Gail and Julie's lawyers would ultimately say that they were just making up these claims because they were trying to get the heat off of their back of accusations to them of improper conduct. So Julie accused Steve of abusing not only alcohol, but also pills, and Charles was also accused of having an affair with Julie and Gail's close friend. However, both couples, everybody in the divorce, were denying having any affair with anybody. And Steve and Charles were unable to prove that Gail and Julie were having any type of affair with each other. So at this point in the case, I also want to go ahead and introduce Bobby Bacha, or I don't know if it's Baca or Bach. I don't really know how to pronounce. It's Bacha. Bobby Bacha. Felix, where are you going? Special introduction. My cat, Felix. He's going back the way he came. Okay. So Bobby was a 43-year-old private investigator, and she owned a PI business called Blue Moon. She was well known for her work. Apparently, she was really good at what she did, and she was always booked and busy. On the evening of July 27th, 1999, Bobby gets a call from Charles, and he was asking Bobby if she could follow his wife and her best friend, Gail, to see if they were having any type of an affair to catch them in the act. Charles was suspicious of Julie's and Gail's relationship because they were too close, I guess. People in the neighborhood would report to Charles that Julie and Gail were spending way too much time together, like best friends would do. People were coming to Charles and telling him that Gail and Julie were spending way too much time together. They were going to lunches. They were taking tennis lessons. And then they would be over at each other's house hanging out. After people would come to him and tell him like, hey, you know, it's kind of weird that your wife and her best friend are spending so much time together, that's when Charles kind of started looking into it a little bit more. And then he started to become suspicious of their relationship. He said he became especially suspicious after watching Gail and Julie hug. He said that they were fondling each other. I'm not really sure how he meant fondling each other, where they were touching specifically. I don't really know the details. He just said that they were fondling each other and he thought that it was weird. On the evening of the 27th, when Charles called Bobby, he wanted Bobby to follow Gail and Julie. And he told Gail and Julie that they could go out, spend some time together, go shopping, do whatever. And then him and Steve would watch the kids. But when he was on the phone with Bobby, he was like, yeah, they're going to go shopping. I told them I'd watch the kids. But he said, and I quote, but I bet they will go to a hotel, or they might just pull over on the side of the highway to do their business. Gail has a boob job and my wife will not be able to wait to touch those puppies. Why are you worried about what Gail is doing and what Gail's boobs are looking like? And if she just recently had a boob job, even though Bobby was like a little bit weirded out or whatever, she didn't really think that there was going to be anything. She agreed to follow them to see if there was anything that she could report on. And she also didn't have any other clients for the night and she didn't really have anything else to do. So she agreed to do it and just went ahead and did. She also didn't want Charles to go to a competitor, like a male competitor specifically. So she just went ahead and took his case. While Bobby was following Julie and Gail, she didn't really see anything suspicious. She said that they went to a few shoe stores, they popped in and out of a few other stores in the mall, and then they stopped for McDonald's on their way back home. Then when Bobby went to report everything back to Charles, she said that she did not notice anything weird. She said that she thought that Gail and Julie's relationship was very similar to that of Wilma and Betty from the Flintstones. She said that nothing lesbian-like took place, and she said that the only time that they would get close was if they were like turning towards each other in the car while they were talking. And after she told Charles that, Charles asked Bobby to play up that very specific detail of like how they would get close by turning to each other in the car. He asked Bobby to play that up in court to make it seem like there's something happening, even though there was nothing really happening. And Bobby flat out refused. She said, absolutely not. I'm not doing that. And after Bobby told him that she wouldn't do that, Charles got really annoyed and just hung up on her. Then after all of that, Gail, believe it or not, Gail and Julie then went to Bobby as well, the private investigator, to try to get Bobby to follow their husbands around to see if Bobby could catch them doing anything or if they were hiding anything. But Gail actually backed out from having the private investigator follow Steve at the last minute because she just wanted to keep the peace during the divorce and just get away from the man. But Julie did not back out. She wanted Bobby to follow Charles, and Bobby actually caught Charles in the act of cheating. He was the one actually cheating after accusing his wife of cheating with her best friend. Bobby noted that Charles was spending a suspicious amount of time at a very particular house. After looking into who lived in the house, Bobby found out that Lori Wells was the woman living in the house, which was a close friend of Julie and Gail. And around that time, Lori Wells was also finalizing her divorce from her husband. So Lori was getting divorced from her husband, Gail getting divorced from her husband, and Julie getting divorced from her husband. And all of these lies or all of these accusations of cheating and improper conduct was coming out. But turns out that Charles was the only one that was really cheating in the relationship with Lori, which, like I said, is Julie's and Gail's close friend. And with all of these accusations and private investigators, you can just imagine that these divorces were messy. It was messy. There was a lot of arguing, not only in court, but there was arguing in public spaces. They were vandalizing each other's homes. They were leaving threatening voicemails. And like I said, they would get into shouting matches in public. Steve and Charles also introduced some type of snippet of a voice call between Julie and Gail, and Julie and Gail ended up accusing them of messing with the recording and splicing together different parts of the conversation to make it seem like they were having a suggestive conversation about eating ice cream. And after looking into it, it was found that they did mess with the recording and they were charged with felony illegal wiretapping. But the charges against Steve were later dropped. Not sure why, but they were dropped. After the divorces and everything was finalized, Charles and Lori actually ended up staying together and moved in together. So that was a little bit of background on the whole situation with Gail and what has happened in her past. But let's get back into talking about Clara and David. After some time of David having the affair with Gail, Clara did end up confronting David about her suspicions, and believe it or not, he admitted it. He said that he was having an affair with her, but he regretted it. It was a mistake, and that he was going to end everything with Gail. So he told Clara that he was going to take her to Perry's, the restaurant, and they were going to have a conversation. He was going to fire her from working as his secretary, and he was going to break things off. But Clara was a little bit suspicious of whether or not he was actually going to do that. So that is when she hired the private investigator, Bobby, to come in and follow David and Gail to see if things were going to play out the way that he told her that they would. The private investigators started tailing David and Gail from David's office. However, they didn't even go to Perry's. They went to the Hilton Hotel, the same Hilton Hotel, girl. So I guess the private investigator got close enough or did something to be able to hear their conversation, or at least watch them in their conversation, because it seemed like David had become very distraught and he changed his mind about ending things with Gail. And he actually told Gail that he still loved her. He didn't want to end things, that he wanted to keep going. However, Gail did end up saying that she did not want to continue this relationship, this affair, if David was still married to Clara. And then she got up and started walking towards her car. But then David actually followed her and they had some type of convincing conversation, because instead of going to her car to leave, David and Gail ended up walking together into the hotel. So they went in, and I don't know if they went and got a room then and there, or if David had already gotten a room, like if that was his plan the whole time, to go to the hotel and maybe have the conversation and break things off there instead of Perry's. But they went into the hotel and they went up to their room. And this is when Bobby called Clara and told her, like, hey, they did not go to Perry's. Like, they're at the hotel right now. But the thing is, like, even before Bobby called Clara to tell her about the situation, Clara was already really antsy, like, at home, and she couldn't sit there and wait for the whole situation to play out. So she decided that she was just going to go to Perry's and she was going to confront Gail and David, and they would all, I guess, have a conversation together. So she left the house with Lindsay and she went to Perry's, but Gail and David were not there. She ended up going to a different restaurant to check if they were there, which was a restaurant that David really liked and they would sometimes go to, but they were also not there. She then went to Gail's house. They were not there. And this was when she received the call from Bobby, and Bobby told her, hey, they did not go to Barry's. They're at the hotel, the same hotel that y'all got married at. All of this was happening on the evening of July 4th, 2002, when Clara went to confront David and Gail about the affair at the hotel. And at this point, the affair has been going on for about a month. The twins, Brian and Bradley, are 4 and Lindsay is 16. When Clara pulls up to the hotel to confront David and Gail, she decided to vandalize Gail's SUV. She keyed it up. She ripped off the windshield wipers and busted the taillights on Gail's car. And then Clara and Lindsay both went into the lobby. They went up to the front desk and they asked, like, hey, I'm here to see David Harris. Can you tell me what room he's in? But the receptionist at the front desk said, there is nobody in here under that name. So then she gave Gail's name, and the receptionist also said there is nobody in here under that name. So obviously David had gotten the room under an alias, which is so crazy because not only did David say that, oh, they're going to go to Perry's, when he knew they weren't going to go to Perry's, he instead brought her to the hotel and he got the room in cash and got it under a different name. Like, this man has thought about every single thing. I find it hard to believe that he was accused of cheating in his past marriage, or maybe he was cheating and his wife just never found out. So then this is when Clara and Lindsay decided that they needed to somehow lure David and Gail out of the room upstairs and down into the lobby. So they decided to they both called David off of their phones, and David answered one of them, and they were like frantic and panicking and saying that the twins were sick and that there's something really wrong and that David needed to come home immediately. And it worked. Like, of course it worked. And at the time during the call, David was like, oh, yeah, well, we'll be on our way. And we actually didn't go to Perry's. We went to Papa Do, I think that's the name of the restaurant, or if that's how it's pronounced. We went to Papa Do, which was a restaurant that Clara and Lindsay did not visit, which again adds on to the fact that this man thought of everything. He lied and said that he was going to Perry's, didn't go to Perry's, went to the hotel instead. And then when he gets a call from Clara, and even though she wasn't accusing him of anything, she was just saying like, oh, and even though she was lying about the twins being sick, she just said like, hey, the twins are sick. You need to come home. Like, we need to go to the hospital. He still thought to say like, oh, well, maybe I shouldn't say Perry's. Let me just say a different restaurant. Weird. So he said that they didn't end up going to Perry's. They went to a different restaurant, and then they ended up coming out the room and down to the lobby. And when they were coming out the elevator, Gail and David were holding hands. And at this point, Clara just completely crashed out. She attacked Gail. She was punching her in the face. She was ripping off her clothes. She was screaming at her. And then she like got up and she was screaming to everybody else in the lobby like, this is David Lynn Harris, and he's an orthodontist and he owns all these offices and he's cheating on me and I'm his wife and he's cheating on me with this lady right here. Like, she was trying to publicly shame this man. And while all of this was happening, Lindsay was hitting David with her purse and she was screaming, I hate you, I hate you, I hate you. It was everything was going down in this lobby. Clara was hitting on Gail and Lindsay was hitting on her dad. Like, it was just, it was chaos. It was complete chaos. And this was around the time where the first 911 call came out of the hotel about the situation and calling for help. And then the hotel employees intervened. They broke up the fight and escorted everybody out. Also, allegedly, the hotel staff reported that they saw David grab Clara's head and like push her into the ground, and I was holding her down, but he was probably trying to break up the fight and like hold her back and stuff. But they said that it was very aggressive, violent. She just rammed her face into the ground. So after the hotel staff escorted everyone out, the police still hadn't made it there yet, and Clara and Lindsay walked away and walked to Clara's car. And so while they were sitting in the car, Clara was still very heated about the whole situation. She was really upset, and she decided that in that moment that she was gonna ram her car into Gail's car to cause more damage, I guess. She backs out. She lines up her car to ram it into Gail's car. And this is when David walks out from beside Gail's car. And at this point, Clara was full speed booking it towards Gail's car. And she reported that at this point, it was way too late to stop. And she unfortunately ended up hitting David with her car and sending him 25 feet across the parking lot. And at this point, Clara is still claiming that it was an accident and that her intention was not to hit David. It was instead to hit Gail's car. And there is also a video of everything taking place, which was being recorded by the private investigator because she was still out there. And in the video, you can see Clara circling around the parking lot, and she actually ran David over 3 times. So her describing and saying like, oh, I was going to hit Gail's car. Oh, David came out of nowhere and I hit him and it was an accident. That's not really what was reflected in the video, because she was circling around and she came back and ran him over and it came back and ran him over and came back and ran him over. And in the video, each time she ran over his body, you could see the car like bouncing up and down. And the whole time she was running this man over multiple times, Lindsay was sitting in the passenger seat witnessing the entire thing. And witnesses would say that they saw Lindsay opening the car door and like she tried to put her feet out to either stop the car or to try to kind of entice Clara to stop the car. But she didn't. And after running David over 3 times, she finally stopped, and Lindsay came out of the car and went around to the driver's side and opened the door and just punched Clara clean in her face. Onlookers would report that she then collapsed to the ground and she was just a sobbing mess. And it's so messed up and unfortunate that Lindsay literally was in the vehicle with her stepmother while she was running her dad over. Like, can you even imagine? Then after Lindsay came out of the car, a few moments later, Clara came out, and she, at first, witnesses said that it looked like she didn't know what to do. She was frantic. She was kind of pacing back and forth, pacing around. She had no idea what to do with herself or in the situation. And then eventually she went up to David's body and she grabbed him and was holding him, like cradling him in her arms. And she was crying. She was apologizing. She was saying, I love you. She was showing a lot of regret or remorse in the situation. And unfortunately, David was pronounced dead at the scene. And after the news broke about the murder and there were interviews on the news with like patients or friends, they were even questioning if this was the same David and Clara that they were all thinking about, because it just seemed so random and out of the blue. And there was they just didn't see it coming at all. The trial began in February of 2003, which was less than a year after the murder took place. And people would report that throughout all this time, Clara was actually still wearing her wedding ring. And during the trial, Lindsay testified against Clara, and she would say that during the whole incident, she was begging Clara to stop the car. And before she hit David initially, when she was going full speed towards Gail's car, she said that she saw him and she said that she was going to hit him, like intentionally, purposefully. I'm going to hit this man. And because Lindsay reported this, the prosecution was trying to prove that this was more than just a crime of passion, which a crime of passion is done without premeditation. It's done out of anger, like in the moment. But because Clara stated that she wanted to hurt David, which she also actually admitted during her police interview that she wanted to hurt David, because she admitted this, the prosecution had a little bit more grounds to claim that this was more than just a crime of passion. And they were also trying to claim that Clara went to the hotel with the intentions of hurting David, which I don't know. I personally think that's a little bit of a stretch of them to say that she went to the hotel with the intentions of hurting David. Is this true? Did she see David when she was in the car and she said, I'm going to hit him, I'm going to run him over? I believe that. But premeditated, like knowingly going to the hotel to intentionally harm David, I don't know. So the video that the private investigator recorded at the scene of the crime was introduced during the trial. And in the video, like I mentioned earlier, you could see Clara circling the parking lot 3 times, and each time she hit David's body, the car would kind of bounce. But Clara tried to argue that because in the video you could not see David's body, she said that the bouncing of the car was actually her running over a curb. And there was only 1 tire mark on David's body. And then this whole thing became a point of like trying to prove whether it was David's body or not in the video. And the prosecution utilized this video as evidence. And during the trial, they had experts come in to analyze the video. During the trial, both the prosecution and the defense had experts come in to analyze the video. And the experts argued that the turn radius of the vehicle would not allow for Clara to circle around and run David's body over 3 times. It just wouldn't have worked out that way because the vehicle wouldn't be able to turn sharply enough. And when the defense argued that, the prosecution actually admitted that it was a good point. But even though there was only 1 tire mark on David's body, the tire marks on the pavement in the parking lot they were all in line with where David's body was. So the car would have had to go over him. During the trial, Clara was also advised to not speak, but after watching everything unfold for the first few days, she decided that she had to say something. And because she was advised to not speak during the trial or to not take the stand during the trial, there were certain parts of her police interview that were actually inadmissible. But because she decided to take the trial, those recordings that were inadmissible were now able to come into play. And in the recordings of the police interview, Clara admitted that she did want to hurt David in that moment in time, but it was not her intention to kill him. Now, this trial was apparently super stressful. It was messy. Everybody was under an immense amount of stress, so much so that Clara's attorney actually passed out during the trial from all the stress, and the judge had to call a recess. Clara was continuing to argue that she did not see David in time to stop the car. But with the video evidence, the defense did make a good point of the turn radius of the Mercedes. However, the tire marks on the pavement lining up to where David's body was, it was too overpowering. And the defense, they were not able to prove that Clara didn't run David over multiple times, and she was ultimately found guilty. On February 14th of 2003, which is crazy because this Valentine's Day, the same day that she got married, she was sentenced to 20 years in prison, which was the maximum sentence for a crime of sudden passion. And she was also fined $10,000. She served her time in Mountain View Unit in Gatesville, Texas. And while she was in prison, she served her time converting textbooks into Braille for blind students. And after losing both parents basically in such a short amount of time, Clara's sons were taken into custody by family friends, and they would go in to visit Clara in prison about once a month. In 2013, Clara applied for parole, but she was denied. She applied a second time in 2016 and it was also denied. And then she submitted a request in November of 2017, which was granted, and she was released from prison on May 11th of 2018. And then her parole was up in February of 2023. So after Clara was convicted in February of 2003, reporters reached out to Gail to get her to come in for interviews, but she continued to decline. She was not interested. But about 7 months later, she reached out to News to Houston's Cindy Garza for an interview. But there was one condition. There was supposed to be no cameras and no audio. It was just supposed to be a face-to-face interview. Cindy could take as many notes as she wanted and reported it that way. But Gail did not want to be recorded. So for this section of the video, I'm going to be reading a lot of what Gail reported during the interview, because in the article, they gave specific quotations of what was said and what was asked. So Cindy asked, "What happened when you got off of that elevator?" And then Gail said, "We were leaving the hotel and I was looking at David and I noticed all of a sudden his face changed and I went to look at the direction he was looking at and then I saw her. Soon after that, it all turned into a massive turmoil, and the only thing that I could do was yell for help, for someone to please get her off of me." Gail says that before Clara was pulled off of her, Clara attacked her, she pulled her hair, she punched her in the head and face, she bit her. Then Gail walked to the car with David following her. Cindy then asked, "Did you see the car coming towards you?" And Gail responded, "Yes." Cindy asked, "What happened?" And Gail responded, "It's hard to tell. I could hear someone yell at me to get away from my car, to get away, and I didn't quite understand why until I turned and looked. Then that was when she struck me on the leg with the vehicle." So I guess Clara also hit Gail. Gail was then thrown to the ground from being hit by Clara's car. And I told him, "Look at what she's done." His last words to me were, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." And then he lost his life shortly after that. Gail also said that when Clara was hitting David with her car multiple times, she didn't know that he had died. She didn't know the extent of his injuries until Lindsay came out of the car and they all kind of gathered around and they noticed that he was just unresponsive. Cindy asked, "What did Lindsay say to you?" She said, "She killed my dad. She killed my dad." And at that point, I knew I had to focus on her. And Gail also said that she didn't see any of this coming. She didn't see it playing out this way because she knew that Clara knew about the affair and she knew that David was coming out to kind of end things with her. So when she showed up, she didn't expect this to be the reaction. Like, maybe she would be upset. She's not going to be happy or in a good mood, right? Gail did not expect such a violent outburst. Gail also reported that since this incident that she has been diagnosed with PTSD and has been on medication to help treat her symptoms. Gail also said a lot of women would say to her that, "I don't feel sorry for you because you were going out with a married man." And she also said, "The affair was wrong. I do not regret or will ever regret that I got to know him and that he became a part of my life. He once told me that he would like to spend the rest of his life with me, and he did." And I think that that's also something, when I was looking into this case, that was also something that I have never thought about. I've consumed a lot of true crime content regarding crimes of passion, regarding spouses or partners being killed because they were having an affair. But one thing I never thought about was how that would affect the person that they were cheating with. And even though cheating is wrong, they were intimate, they were allegedly in love. And so this person also lost someone that they had fallen in love with. So what would the process of healing and getting past that look like for the mistress, which is something that I never really thought about or even considered. During the interview, Cindy asked, "If you had anything to say to Clara, what would it be?" Which she responded, "This was an unfortunate tragedy, but it did not have to end this way." Gail also said that her heart goes out to the children, especially Lindsay, because she was the one to witness everything and to be in the vehicle while everything was happening. David would always call Lindsay his angel, but now David is her angel. And the messed up thing too is that Gail specifically told Cindy, the interviewer, that they were not supposed to come with any cameras, no audio, anything. And they still showed up to her house with cameras and audio. And when she opened the door and noticed that they were out there with the camera, she bolted to her bedroom and would not come out until they got rid of all of the equipment. But at the end of the interview, Gail told Cindy that her life has never been the same since that night, and where the vehicle struck her leg, she still has pain from the injuries that she endured. After Clara was released from prison, she also did an interview with Amy Davis. And during the interview, Clara discussed a lot of things from her point of view. And she reported that she had a purse that was in the vehicle that she never got back. And in the purse was an album that had wedding pictures, pictures of them as a couple, pictures of them as a family with Lindsay and Brian and Bradley. And she said that she had the album in her purse in the car because before all of this took place, Lindsay, David, Clara, and David's parents sat down and had a conversation where David admitted to the affair and everyone was aware of what was going on. And David immensely apologized, and he was saying that he was going to break things off and he wanted to fix his marriage and that, you know, essentially everything was going to be okay. And during this conversation, Lindsay got up, left the room, left the house actually, and she went to the library to buy a few books that would help David and Clara with to fix their marriage, because she really did love Clara and she wanted the marriage to work out. So the books that she went out and purchased were Relationship Rescue, a 7-step strategy for reconnecting, getting back together, and how to create a new loving relationship with your old partner and make it last. And Lindsay also became suspicious that something was happening between Clara and David. She wasn't sure exactly what, but she did confront Clara to ask her about how she was feeling about being married to David, because she noticed changes in Clara's behavior. And then during the interview, Clara admitted that she was abusing alcohol and other drugs to kind of cope when she found out about the affair. And during the interview, Lindsay took stand in the trial and discussed how being in the car and witnessing the murder sent her into a deep depression, and she suffered several suicide attempts. And after Lindsay admitted this during the trial, Clara blurted out, I'm sorry, Lindsay baby. And they were both crying, and the judge had to call a recess to get everyone to kind of calm down and then reconvene. And during the trial, David's parents were actually in defense of Clara a little bit, saying that she would be a good candidate for probation and that they didn't want her to go to prison, mostly because they didn't want the children to lose both parents. But I guess after that didn't play out, they kind of flipped the script and ended up suing Clara for wrongful death, because David had promised to take care of his parents financially for the rest of their lives, and now he wasn't here to do it anymore. So they wanted financial compensation for that, and they also sued Clara for her half of David's estate. And Clara also reported that after she was released, she was afraid to go out into public. She did not want to be recognized. And the crazy thing is, when this trial was taking place, after the murder happened, after the media got hold of everything, everybody was on Clara's side. They were in defense of Clara. They were very understanding of why Clara did what she did. And they had very little, if any, sympathy for David and Gail. And there was even a talk show that was discussing this case, and is a radio show, and people were able to call in and kind of give their opinions on the case. And there was a caller that said that David made his decision and he signed his own death the minute he decided to walk out of the hotel, not with his wife and child, but instead comforting and walking alongside Gail, his mistress. There were also letters sent out to the Houston Chronicles, and writers were blaming Gail for knowingly going out with a married man and basically ruining a marriage and ruining a family, and that Clara acted out every woman's fantasy by murdering David after she found out that he was having an affair. And there were some comments even in the videos that I was watching of the trials and any other coverage of this case on YouTube, and people were in the comments saying things like, I can't say I blame her, or I would do the same thing, and I have been cheated on and I definitely wanted to kill him, but for the sake of my children I chose not to. And there was also another comment that said, if it were a husband that killed his wife, the comments would look much different. Clara even reported that a security guard, while she was in prison, pulled her to the side and told her that she was proud of her for murdering her husband when she found out that that he was cheating on her. And Clara reported that she was shocked. She didn't know what to say in the moment, and she said that she felt disgusted in a way because she doesn't want anyone to be proud of what she did in that moment. And she was even shocked that anybody would think that she would take that as a compliment. Now, if we circle back to the beginning where I was talking about how perfect Clara and David's marriage was initially, then a fair question would be, why have an affair? Why would David go out and have an affair if their marriage was so perfect and they were so in love, and if everybody could see that? Well, David's friends actually reported that a lot of the times he felt very underappreciated by Clara. He said that he felt as if she was consumed by work and the children, and a lot of her attention would go towards her work and go towards the kids, and he would be left with nothing. And his friends also reported that maybe a married middle-aged man with kids, getting attention from a new woman, an attractive woman, was something that was just too tantalizing to resist. And there were other people in the office that said that David fell under a spell of a woman that was obviously trying to sexually seduce him. There were also other coworkers in the office that reported that they felt like Cjae was purposely trying to seduce David because she would, quote, bend over in front of him to pick things up, but instead of like hinging at the knees, she would hinge at the hips to try to be more, I don't know, sexually suggestive in a way. And while all of this was happening, like the flirting and all of that was taking place, the workers in the office also said that Cjae never mentioned anything about being interested in David. It wasn't until David asked her out where she went and she confided to a few of her coworkers about the situation and saying like, oh, David asked me out. And she also said that David told her that he loves her and that the only reason why he's staying with Clara is for the sake of his family, his kids, and the business. But after hearing this information, David's friends came into the defense of David, saying that I don't think that he was really in love with Cjae. He was just infatuated with this new found attention from an attractive woman, and he was just in lust with her. And they didn't think that he would actually leave Clara and his family to be with her. And one of the workers in the office also admitted that they at some point during the day would turn off the cameras so that the cameras would not catch David and Cjae flirting in the office. David's friends eventually confronted David about the affair with Cjae because they could notice their interactions and all that. And during their conversation, David admitted that, you know, he was having the affair, but he also said that he would not leave Clara and his family for Cjae, because he loved her too much and he loved his family too much. But he also said that it was very difficult to cut things off with Cjae because he had become so emotionally invested. It was also reported that after Clara found out about the affair, she started to look completely different. She lost 10 pounds. She had liposuction. She had a breast augmentation. She was tanning regularly. And it was reported that she was doing all of this in the efforts to win David back. And she even said that after David confessed to having the affair and she did all these things and she was working on herself and they were working on the marriage, that for a moment things were really, really good. But obviously, we know how that played out. So that is the case of Cjae Harris and David Lynn Harris. Let me know your thoughts and opinions about this case. And it definitely is It's a weird one. You're sympathizing with Clara on one aspect of this. You know, she found out that her husband of 10 years and three kids was having an affair. But did he really deserve to lose his life because of this? The issue could have been solved in so many other ways, you know. Let me know your thoughts and opinions about this case, and also let me know if there are any cases that you would like for me to cover in the future. Please take care, be kind to yourself and others, and I will see you in the next one.